talking about how to use basic design principles when you're staging a home and when you're planning on the stage for the home that you're doing.
So by using basic design principles, you can affect the way that a potential buyer perceives the look and feel of the home.
Your job is to make a buyer feel welcome and at home and excited when they walk into the space. And while you're doing staging, the truth is you're employing design principles. So let's dig into some of those.
Sounds good. So you want to think about the space when you are creating your design for your staging installation. And you want to think about, like, what are the elements, what are the best features in the space that need to be accentuated or that need to be highlighted in order to present the home in its best light.
So for instance, maybe the windows in this living room are really beautiful or special, or maybe the view is spectacular.
Right.
Then you would want to be mindful that you position furniture so that it's not blocking a view, so that it takes advantage of the view.
Right.
And there are so many different interesting elements of a space. Maybe there's a really beautiful, grand, fireplace that you could play up. How would we do that?
Well, we can do that in a number of different ways. In the past, you can do the traditional piece of art over the fireplace. We were in a situation where we had a house that had this gorgeous custom, it was kind of a rustic rock fireplace that went all the way up to the wall, and it had this gorgeous, rustic live edge wooden mantle on it. And instead of just slapping a canvas over it, we used vignettes and greenery to create some visual interest and to create some height and to draw your eye upward and to really accentuate the beauty and the craftsmanship behind that element of the home.
Right. So you're thinking about not only how to enhance the most special parts of the space, but also how to make this space really work in the best way to show how livable it is, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So again, you have a fireplace, then, putting the sofa opposite the fireplace is a formula that we often do. And then we'll often flank, 2 swivels on each side of the fireplace to create that warm conversational area. Another thing that you should be mindful of is avoiding super busy patterns, especially if the house maybe has original hardwood floors that are in beautiful condition, or maybe they've recently been redone. You don't want to cover up the craftsmanship of the home. And again, we go back to this a lot. We use neutrals and we use neutral rugs fairly frequently because we don't want to detract from the architectural elements of the home. And in the event that a home has beautiful floors, you don't want to cover all of that up. You want people to see it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good selling point. The goal is emphasize the best features of the home when we're talking about space. And along that lines, talking about space, we also need to be mindful as stagers not to overfill a space. Right? You want to create a sense of openness and spaciousness. So you show the lifestyle, but don't overfill the room. You don't want it to be so busy that a potential buyer can't envision other ways that they might use the space, or leave them a little room for their own imagination, a little room for their own pieces of furniture, if you will.
Yeah, in their minds. Yeah, and here's another important principle that we learned over time, and that has to do with the quality of the inventory that you invest in. And it's better to have better quality, larger scale pieces of furniture than to have a lot of little dinky pieces, because you can convey, again, that lifestyle. You're conveying a look of luxury, a look of wealth, if you will, by putting really nice high-end pieces of furniture into a space. And one large console that has some nice presents, and one large accessory and 2 hefty lamps are going to communicate that, one, it's going to set the stage for the space, but it's also going to, again, communicate that lifestyle, communicate that look of luxury that you want to convey. And it also reduces the number of things that you have to bring into the house.
Yeah.
So you can do, 3 tchotchkes on in a vignette, And that's fine, that's pretty, but you can also do one big piece, one large, plant and 2 large lamps and call it a day, and you won't overdo the space.
You don't overdo it. Yeah. They're 2 really different approaches, and I particularly like using oversized stuff specifically because it helps keep a space. Sometimes it's important that you keep the space visually calm, especially when the house has really beautiful natural elements of its own, right? Like really beautiful architectural elements. In those situations, I think less is more. Exactly what you're saying.
Yeah. And there's the other side of me, the decorator side of me, that like I like stuff and I like vignettes and I like color and texture and layers and all of these things, and that's great. But you've got to find a balance there.
Yeah.
And when you're purchasing your inventory, it's important that you put the money in, invest it wisely in terms of the scale and the quality of furnishings that you buy. And this is a good reason for it.
It is. And you're so good at the layering and the building of vignettes and all of these really special things. And I think listening to you talk about it, there's an opportunity for really 2 different approaches to this. And I think that our staging is most effective when we're using tons of layers and tons of accessories in homes that maybe aren't as special.
Right. Or as grand.
Right. Yeah. And we get to those really crazy grand homes with, big arched windows and really special floors, then we tend to simplify.
Yes.
And do fewer pieces.
Yes, large scale, but like fewer pieces. Yeah, so I mean, it's a bit of a dance.
It is, but it's a good staging strategy.
It really is.
Yeah.
So another design principle that you want to be mindful of when you're creating your staging design is the shapes and the architectural elements within the home. These are going to affect the items that you bring into the home because you don't want to do anything to detract from these architectural elements, and you need to find a way to enhance them and to draw attention to them for the potential buyers.
Right. So designers use shapes in a lot of ways to emphasize or accentuate really their specific design. For example, let's imagine that this property has a lot of round edges, right? Maybe the windows are curved or arched. Maybe doorways in the home are curved or arched. That's a soft, kind of pretty feel. And so you as the stager can really play that up. One, by recreating those patterns. Perhaps you want to then use a rounded mirror over a console to accentuate architecturally what's already happening in the space. It creates symmetry, it creates calm, and it really plays up the home's best features.
It does. And so this is another area of interest that you need to be aware of when you're investing in your staging inventory. Whether you're doing an ultra modern home or an ultra traditional home, this is why we encourage you to stay neutral in the items that you purchase for your inventory. You can get funky and wild and bring your pops of color in some of your smaller scale items, in your pillows and some of your canvases and things like that. But in terms of, the rugs that we buy and the furniture that we choose, we try to keep it all very neutral and classy so that it would work in any space, and again, not detract from those elements that these builders put into these homes.
Right.
And I love the idea of mimicking, the style of the home. If you have a spiral staircase, then maybe, a rug with a round rug in the foyer, or, some way to mimic that shape in the staging materials that you bring in.
Yeah, it really draws attention to what's unique about the house. So on the flip side of all those round shapes then, maybe this home is really modern in its design and really angular. So again, you have an opportunity then to kind of play on that shape concept and recreate those hard angles, maybe using more geometric prints in the artwork that you select for the property, as opposed to florals and landscapes, right? You're keeping with the property. It creates that calm. It creates a figurative sense of symmetry, really. And I guess on that note then, Erin, you don't always have to repeat what's happening. It can be really interesting if you execute it properly to contrast what's happening. So again, with the idea that this maybe is a very angular, modern type of home, you could mix it up and soften that if your goal as a stager is to tone down a real modern design. Then maybe you do bring in some round mirrors and some softer textures in terms of upholstery and throws.
And your baskets and your greenery, they're just a really good way to soften a space. So these are some fun tricks that you can do.
Yeah, and things that are just important for you to be mindful of, as a home stager. Shapes matter. The next design principle that we want to talk about today is lines in a space.
Right. So think about vertical lines. Imagine that you go into a space that has very tall windows. When you're dealing with vertical lines, you need to be mindful in terms of the art that you bring in, or perhaps drapery or things like that. The things that you're going to be bringing into the space to accentuate those lines and to draw your eye upward, so that the buyer gets the full value of that element of the room.
Yeah. What you're doing as a stager is you're almost creating these invisible lines, like Erin is saying, to draw the eye to parts of the room or parts of the home that you want to emphasize. So you were talking about those windows, Erin, and let's say this is a room with 2-story ceiling, and there's really beautiful architectural beams up there. You want to subconsciously use visual lines, if you will, to draw the person's eye up to the ceiling. So those long windows automatically are going to do that. And then you as the stager could emphasize that with the curtains that you just mentioned. Again, using like really long linear panels that emphasize a vertical line, drawing the eye up to the top of the space.
Right. Or even your art, right? If you have some vertical art and you placed it between the windows, or if you stacked 2 vertical pieces, or if you had some photography that you could put into a gallery wall kind of situation. There are lots of ways that you can play that up. You can play up spaces with floor plants and a taller console and things like that. When the ceilings are very, very tall, there's room for you to use some, again, furniture with very big presence. Is very helpful to fill the space and make it feel warm, and to also accentuate those elements.
Yeah. You're creating a subconscious experience for the potential buyer, whether they realize it or not. And what tends to happen, kind of like psychologically, vertical lines tend to be exciting. They tend to be dramatic. They kind of like bring that sort of sense about it. On the opposite end of that spectrum, then we can talk about horizontal lines, which subconsciously have more of what I would say is a like a calming and a grounding effect on somebody subconsciously.
So one way you can play that up is so suppose that you're walking into a property and it has a long foyer or a long hallway. How you can play up those horizontal lines is with a long runner. And then maybe a gallery wall on the same plane. Everything's on the same level down the wall. All black and white prints. In the same size frame or something like that. Something that has some congruency that draws your eye down that hallway, and again accentuates the space. And then those horizontal lines ground the space to give it that warmth.
Another way you can create horizontal lines, if you will, is to use furniture and pieces and artwork that all kind of follow the same lines in terms of height. Keeping everything kind of consistent has less of an exciting effect and more of like a dampening, calming sort of effect.
So another design principle to keep in mind when you are planning your stage is light. This is such an important factor when you're staging any house, because the light creates the vibe of the entire experience for the potential buyers.
It does. Not only does it create the vibe, which is super important, but it also helps to draw attention to special elements of the home. It helps to make the space feel really open and airy and clean and bright and happy. All of these psychological things that you're trying to impart on a potential buyer. So really, we say this all the time, light is your superpower. It is the most powerful tool that you have in your bag. So you want, when you're planning your design, to be really mindful of how light is being used in the space. Natural light, of course, we always say is most important. Start there.
Yep. Open your blinds, open your windows, draw those curtains. If the curtains are unnecessary, remove those curtains. Make sure the blinds are as open and as letting in as much light as possible. And then use your staging inventory to create ambient lighting, which is a critical part of warming up a space. You can use ambient lighting with, the lamps on your end tables and your floor lamps to lighten a darkened area of the room and put some life there. A piece of art and some greenery and a lamp can really cozy a space up. And then, of course, lamps on your tabletops, lamps on your consoles and around the living room space. All of these things create that mood, and it's such an important part of staging.
It is. It's really important that you as a stager be really mindful of areas of the home or the space that feel a little gloomy. Right. And that is going to be the easiest way that you can improve on that and kind of change that vibe from gloomy or dank to sad, right, to something that feels a lot better. And that can be just as simple as bringing some light into the space. And then you also want to use light to accentuate the best features of the house. Right. Maybe there's this incredible island in the kitchen, but if it's poorly lit, is it really showing as magnificently as it could be? Right. So use lighting as your most effective and powerful tool, because it truly is.
It truly is. And we've said this many times before, but go ahead and turn on all of the lights. Let's eliminate the guesswork for the potential buyers. Which switch turns on this light? Turn them on for them. Have everything on. Have your, undermount cabinet lighting up. Have your closet lights on, have the powder room lights on. Turn it all on so that when they come in, they're not fumbling around trying to find which switch is it, Make it easy for them. And again, it photographs beautifully.
Yeah, it really does.
Right? It's just a very simple, very quick way to increase the light and therefore the perceived value of the house. So guys, while you are planning and preparing to start taking on your staging inventory, we have created some really helpful, actionable checklists, and one of them is your shopping checklist for when you go out to buy your staging inventory. Whether you buy it at stores or buy it wholesale, we've made it really easy for you. So if you click on the link below and jump over to our membership site, we have dozens of videos and tons of downloadable resources that you can use, that you have unlimited access to, that you can print off and use for your staging business. So pop on that link and check it out.
The next design principle that we want to talk about is color and how you as a home stager use color. It can be really fun to use color to, create moods or feelings. But you got to keep in mind that not everybody has the same tastes or preferences.
Or the same response to color that you have, right?
Let's
talk about Jenny and me for a second, right? So I'm very I like cool colors. I like blues and greens and coastal colors. And Jenny is more earthy.
Yeah, I like, warm tones and, chestnuts and rust and, a lot of greens and it's just a real different kind of palette.
Right, yeah. Right. So some colors give me an actual visceral response. And if I go into a room, for example, that has a lot of red, I feel this it actually gives me a bit of anxiety. And not everybody responds in that way. But this is something that you need to be mindful of,
Yeah.
If you're trying to appeal to a really broad range of people, and you're using a bright red sofa, you're going to terrify. Maybe. No.
Maybe. You for
some
sure.
Some people may not respond favorably to colors that you love. So that's something just to be mindful of. And this goes back to buying your staging inventory. You know, if you keep it neutral and you keep it very soft, and don't be afraid of a pop of color.
Yeah.
To make your photography stand out. But this goes back to, marketing to the broadest possible group of people.
Yes, for sure. And you're absolutely right, Erin. There is real psychology behind colors and how they affect people's emotions. Red tends to be, evoke aggressive responses. And in that same tone, blues and greens tend to evoke calm feelings.
Right.
And we use blues and greens as our accessory color primarily.
Right.
And it's important. We want people to have a happy, positive experience, but we also want them to feel calm and relaxed in our spaces.
Yeah.
And the most important piece of that is what you said about using neutral bones.
Yeah, yeah, especially for staging. Again, this isn't custom design. This is staging. When you're getting into custom design, you're doing work for clients. That's a totally different ballgame. What we're talking about here is creating a space that's going to appeal to anybody that walks into that house.
Yeah.
And not just the people who like red.
Exactly. And when you're using the neutral bones, let's say most of your upholstery is we use a lot of linens, whites, flax, oatmeal colors, just real simple neutral shades. It does give you some flexibility and versatility then for those occasional rare situations where you do want to use an unusual accent color.
Right.
Because it can happen. You can easily bring in your accent color in a simple, affordable way and just mix it up in terms of pillows and throws instead of, having to invest in different types and colors on your big pieces.
Yeah, exactly.
Another design concept to keep in mind: pattern. How are you going to use pattern? Are you going to use pattern in your home staging design?
You can use pattern and still use it in a subtle way, and create texture and create layers without getting super wild and crazy and complicating things when it comes to packing up and choosing the staging inventory that you're going to install. The way that we do that, again, we stick with a lot of neutrals, but our throw pillows might have different textures and some small scale patterns, some large scale patterns, ways to mix it up to keep the room feeling interesting and to add some layers of texture to the space.
Patterns can still be neutrals in my mind, right? Like maybe we have a oatmeal colored sofa or a flax colored sofa, but perhaps it's actually got a subtle woven pattern in it. It creates some visual interest, but it still reads as very neutral. We both tend to have kind of eclectic design and taste of our own.
Yeah.
But perhaps the, wild and wacky wallpaper that you absolutely love is not, going to be the best choice when you're looking at how to create a space that appeals to the widest possible number of buyers.
Right.
So the idea is use pattern to increase visual interest, but keep your pattern relatively neutral.
Yes, and timeless patterns are going to, you're going to get more use out of them than the real trendy things. Like, so we know that, 10 years ago that chevron was like all the rage. Well, if you had some chevron pillows and it started to kind of trend out, no big deal. Not a huge investment, not a lot of money lost there.
Right.
Then you switch them out and you make some new pillows or you buy some new pillows with a different pattern. It's just something to be mindful of. If you stick with more classic design choices like a Greek key or again going back to that flax linen and just kind of the woven patterns and the more textural variations as opposed to like really bold colorful patterns, you're going to get more use out of it in the long run in terms of your staging inventory.
You mentioned texture, And this is a really good way also to create feelings in a potential buyer, right? It's like texture can give people the feeling of warmth or coziness, and that can be really compelling.
It can, and you can do this in a number of ways. Again, we've talked about upholstery textures, but let's talk about the accessories you choose, right? We have a formula that we use when we're creating design and staging, and it is that we try to incorporate a little bit of each element. Every house, every space is going to have some glass. It's going to have some wood. It's going to have some clay. It's going to have something, sparkly. It's going to have, mixed metals.
Yeah.
There's going to be something with a mirrored finish. There are going to be all of these elements in this space to create that layered, interesting, and complete look that we're going for.
Yeah, even though staged spaces can sometimes feel a little bit like showrooms,
right?
We don't want it to. I think showrooms can sometimes sort of fall flat, right?
Right.
So by using all of these different textures that Erin is talking about, we keep the space from feeling really kind of one note, right? Textures keep things interesting, keep things exciting, but always in a way that's relatively subtle.
Right. It's all about warmth, right? And so, this is, again, it's just another fun opportunity to incorporate some of these great elements into your stage spaces and into the inventory that you purchase as a stager. So guys, if there are any elements that you think that we've missed, drop them in the comments below. Click on the link below and we will send you our free home staging toolkit checklist. And we also have a free webinar also in the link below that you can enroll, and it's our Pricing for Profits webinar. Doesn't cost a thing, and y'all, we are breaking it down for you in an hour. You can learn exactly how to price your staging services. And it's our number one question that we get from viewers. So we thought we would make it really easy for you. We are Revision's mentor, and we'll see you in the next video.
Thanks for watching.